After maybe the worst half of basketball I've ever seen, Iowa State found a way to pull it together, get the win, and move to 15-0, the best start in program history. But the question now is, was that first half maybe a peek into what this team actually is?
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your host, Nick Marovets. Thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Be sure to hit subscribe down below so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. As today, we're diving into all things basketball. We're going to recap the game from last night. Iowa State gets the win over Baylor, moves to 15-0. I've got some thoughts there. Then we get into the real nitty-gritty in the second segment, where we talk about the possibility that maybe Iowa State isn't as good as we thought. That first half was atrocious. So we're going to address that question. I'm not saying they are right now. Maybe we'll come to the conclusion they are. Maybe we'll come to the conclusion they aren't. You'll have to stick around. Once we know the answer, though, from that second segment, we're going to pivot in the third segment and look at Iowa State in comparison to the rest of the Big 12. The Big 12 is a very tough place to play with teams like Arizona, BYU, Houston. I've got the top 10 currently as I see it. Where does Iowa State fit in? We're going to get into all of that today. I genuinely cannot wait. We haven't talked a lot of basketball because we've been so narrowed in on football. Let's do this. Let's talk about it. And the first place we have to start is the game from last night. Iowa State finds a way to beat Baylor 70-60 after what was maybe one of the ugliest first halves I've seen in a long time. I mean, I've got the stats from the first half right here. Iowa State shot 2 of 10 from beyond the arc, 10 of 36 from the field, 27% from the field, 42% from the line, 3 of 7. It was an ugly first half. And I will just say this right away. The refs were not helping. And I'm not even saying that it was like they were all on Baylor's side. I think if any Baylor fans are watching this, they would probably agree. That was maybe one of the worst refs games I've just ever seen on both sides of the ball. Baylor was getting calls that were just like, what are you doing? Plato was getting fouls, and I actually have seen 2x4s that weren't as straight up and down as he was. It was incredible. So the refs, in conjunction with the fact that there must have been literal saran wrap on top of the buckets, made this a very hard watch. And the first half was really, really ugly, 25-24. First half, going into that break. Iowa State finds a way to turn it on the second, 70-60, the final. I'm going to point out a few things in the box score here, and then we'll move on to my just general thoughts from this game specifically. Joshua Jefferson was 17 rebounds. He was the force for Iowa State on the glass. He had 19 points, 17 rebounds. I mean, that right there was incredible. He had 3 assists and 6 turnovers. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. 5 of those rebounds on the offensive side of the ball. Tamon Lipsey had 26 points. Talk about bringing the picnic blanket to the party. I mean, this was incredible showing from Tamon Lipsey as a point guard. Got in foul trouble early. Really demonstrated when he was on the bench just how important he is to this team. He ended up with 3 rebounds, so nothing too crazy there, and 2 assists, but 24 points for Tamon Lipsey was incredible on 26 minutes. Killian Torre brought 12 points of his own, and then 4 points from Milan Momcilovich is kind of the other story that we're going to break down. Blake Buchanan did not score at all. The scoring in this one was very, very interesting. Guys off the bench, Nate Heisey had 6, Dominic Nelson had 3, and Dominicus Plata had 2. Okay, that being said, those are kind of the general numbers that I wanted to look at. The first question to address is Milan. Where was he, right? Only 4 points in this one. Didn't shoot that much. Only shot 3 threes, 6 times from the floor. I would have liked to have seen him incorporated a little bit more, but still, I only saw 24 minutes. This was a very weird game, and I think a lot of that came down to the fouls. Like I said, Tamon Lipsey, only with 26 minutes in this one, ended up with, I think he had 2 in the first 3 minutes, and I tweeted it out at Nick_Marv. I watch these games live and tweet out about them if you're interested. And I was like, that is such a load. And boy, did we know. We did not know at that point, actually, what we were about to get ourselves into. It was bad on all fronts. I don't have the total number. Where is the total number of fouls here? I mean, it was ridiculous. Personal fouls, 25 for Iowa State, 22 for Baylor. if I'm counting that right. It felt like every player was just constantly playing in foul trouble. Like, as the game progresses, 2 fouls in 3 minutes, that's considered foul trouble. And I think Buchanan, I was the one that I noticed that was out there with like 6 minutes maybe, and he had 4 fouls. And it just was kind of one of those moments where I think Otzelberger knew we had to win that area of the game if we played conservative and let Baylor get back into it. Then you get guys out there, they have to make more aggressive plays with 4 fouls. You just get yourself in a weird spot. And that's why TJ is one of the greatest coaches out there. He knew that the time to basically push was with a couple minutes to go, just under that like halfway mark of the second half. Phenomenal play by him. But it did feel like a lot of these guys were playing with fouls consistently in foul trouble, is what I meant to say in this one. So that I think played a huge role in just kind of the dynamics in this one. And I'm not going to put a ton of kind of stock into it for that reason. Because to be fair, Baylor was dealing with the same thing. And, they only scored 60 points. They threw up, ESPN or whatever it was, threw up a graphic midway through, I think it was the second half, that they Baylor scored 93.1 points per game. They ended up with 60 on the night. So that's good defense from Iowa State, sure. But, I mean, Baylor shot worse than Iowa State did. I talked about how ugly that first half was for Iowa State. Baylor on the night shot 30.6%, 18.5% from three, and just over half of their free throws. They shot 29 free throws, and they only made 17 of them. The first half was slightly worse than the second. They only shot 18% from the floor. I don't know what was on the floor last night, like what was going on with these baskets. Nobody could make anything. But when it comes down to a slugfest, I guess Iowa State has the slight edge there. It felt like they played really good defense. It felt like they were getting up and down the court, but there was definitely moments of some carelessness, some turnovers that I felt like Iowa State could have easily avoided. And there was moments of, which we'll talk more about this in the second segment, but this is more of a look at just last night. Some moments where I was confused what we were doing offensively. Like, what, this feels so different from what they're normally running, that I was just, I get slightly concerned when the mojo gets thrown off for Iowa State. And like I said, I'll elaborate on that in a second. And it ended up working out in this one. Iowa State moves to 15-0. They escape the NBA player James Nagy and the Baylor Bears. And I think that was a team that Iowa State should have beat. I think a lot of people, though, were kind of on the same boat that I was, with the vibes feel a little bit off here. First time not at home in quite some time. Shout out to the Baylor, crowd showed up pretty big time, a lot bigger than I thought they would. It being like, January 7th, it's a tough time of the year. It's what I was talking about yesterday with, I want these teams, or Iowa State, to play these teams on the road at this time when the crowd's not as full. Baylor still showed up. They had those cupcake signs in the crowd. I will say it was a pretty tough place to shoot free throws. I felt like, we'll talk more about another place I thought was really, really tough to shoot free throws, and will be, in the third segment. But yeah, what a night for Iowa State. What a show, if you will. They finally got it done, and they turned it on in the second half. That's how it felt. It was just kind of a finally, like a breath of fresh air once that second half got underway and Iowa State started to actually make some buckets. Like I said, the first half shot poorly for Iowa State here, 27% from the floor, 20% from three. In the second half, they doubled both of those, 57% from the field and 44% from beyond the arc. So found a way to get some buckets, but it felt off. And sometimes those are the ones that you just have to win. Those are the ones that great teams win. You're not going to be on every night. And it's very lucky that Baylor wasn't, because this could have quickly turned into a, 42-25 half. Like that, they could have blown out the first half had Baylor shot, even 30% better, which wouldn't have been that. I guess 30% would be a lot. Let's not say that. Maybe 20%. If they were shooting 48% from the floor, like that would already just under half. That'd be like 16-ish, 17 buckets. And that's an extra 10, 11, 12 points. They make a few extra free throws. Instead of being down one, they're up 15. You can easily find that if they make a few threes in there, up 16, 17. So Iowa State got a little lucky in that regard, and the refs kept killing the momentum of the game, which I think was a big part of this too. They found a way to escape, though. They found a way to get the win. And that's really all you can ask for at this point in the season, is to get the win and to move on to the next one, because at some point, wins matter. They just do. You have to play as a team and develop and stuff, but you also have to win while doing that. And if it's just going to be an off night, it's going to be an off night. Find a way to win when those are the circumstances. That being said, while it is kind of one of those where you just got to win it, you got to move on, Iowa State is showing some cracks. They're showing some tendencies that I don't personally love. Is this team that good? We answer that question coming up right here after this. Let's be real. Managing your finances can feel very overwhelming. I'll tell you that myself. Between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep going up, and trying to figure out where all your money actually goes each month, it's easy to feel like you're losing control. And who has time to track every transaction or hunt down hidden fees? That's where Rocket Money comes in, the personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. I personally, I'm very forgetful. I love that it tracks all my subscriptions. And when I do forget about one, it lets me cancel them right in the app with just a few taps. No more hunting down customer service numbers because, boy, there are some out there that it's just almost impossible to cancel. The automatic transaction categorization is a game changer. I can finally see exactly where my money is going every month. I don't have to go listing by listing in my transaction history and do it myself. Rocket Money can do that for me. So let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/locked-on. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. rocketmoney.com/locked-on. So Iowa State squeaks out a win against Baylor to move to 15-0, 70-60 final score, a little bit below what both of these teams normally score, but they found a way to get it done. But when you watch the game, there's concern, man. There's red flags that are going up. Alarms are sounding as I'm watching Iowa State dribble the ball up the court and potentially turn it over or just throw up a random shot. So how real are these alarms? How legit are these red flags? Am I wearing rose-colored glasses or am I wearing, maybe blue glasses where everything looks a little bit more red? I don't know exactly where I was going with that analogy, but you see what I'm saying. Maybe I'm too hyper vigilant. We'll talk about that here in a second, but I wanted to first thank you guys for making Locked On Cyclones your first watch or listen of the day, and for making Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, go check out our Everydayer Club. The link on the screen is lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer. I've got the link to the Locked On Cyclones Everydayer Club in the show notes below. If you haven't checked it out, it's just an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Cyclones wherever you listen, and it gets you access to a members-only Locked On Everydayer Discord server. Thank you guys for checking it out. But more importantly, thank you guys for tuning in every single day. Could not do this without you. Let's talk about it. Is Iowa State actually that good? Well, I hate to break it to you. This is going to be hard to say. Yes, they are. They are that good, man. I'm sorry to say it, but teams that shoot that poorly in the first half and find a way to win are that good. It is so fun to watch this Iowa State Cyclones team. That being said, let's keep our heads on. Let's keep our legitimate, kind of blinders on, if you will. The glasses that we're looking at this team with can't be rose-colored. We have to acknowledge the fact that this team is not perfect. When I say that, that is totally fine. It is very early January. You don't want to peak in January. It's what we talked about with Audie Crooks and what she said. You don't want to peak right now. Had Iowa State beaten Baylor, 284-10, no, that's a lie. I wouldn't say I'm concerned. I'd say this team probably could beat any team in the entire galaxy, but there would be an element of like, is this even sustainable? Is it possible to win a game by 250 points for the next, 3 months? I would argue no. That's just something that it's like out of a movie. So the fact that they got the win makes me feel good that this team is resilient. They found a way, because it legitimately looked like there just was no way to score for a while there. And one of the bright spots of this Cyclone team is what I noticed last night is you have multiple guys who can score. And we've talked about this. I believe we talked about it, especially with Nick Arvin of Purdue before that Purdue game. It was like, who is Purdue going to shut down? Who's Purdue going to slow down? Is it Momcilovich? Is it Jefferson? Well, if you go with those two, because you can't stop everybody, you've got Buchanan and Lipsey, who are going to be a problem. And if somehow every starter for Iowa State's having an off night, you got guys like, Jamarian Bateman, who might come out and shoot 3 of 3 from beyond the arc and be the offensive spark that Iowa State needs. Oh, wait, that just happened against West Virginia. Oh, that's weird. So the depth for Iowa State is very exciting, but not only the depth, the depth across the board, right? You've got a bunch of guys who can shoot, guys like Milan Momcilovich, who are shooting lights out from beyond the arc. One of the best shooting runs we've seen, maybe in Iowa State history, but also maybe in all of college basketball history. But then also, just last night from beyond the arc, Lipsey went 2 of 3. Heisey went 2 of 4. Felt like Heisey was kind of the 3-point answer a little bit last night. Iowa State did not shoot well from beyond the arc. They shot all right at 32%. They didn't have any one person who was kind of a standout, but they had a relatively even distribution across the team. They also didn't have anyone stand out shooting 6, 7, 10 threes, which was kind of nice, other than maybe if Milan would have been the one shooting that many, I would have been okay with it. But generally, I wouldn't want a super lopsided one person shooting a ton of threes. So that's one of my favorite things about this team is they do have the depth, and the depth not only in the post, but as shooters, as playmakers. There's a lot to like about this team. But that being said, let's bring up, I have 4 concerns here written down that I just wanted to kind of bring your attention to as stuff that I am at least keeping an eye on. I'm sure this will all get cleaned up in due time, but so far till this season, through the first 15 games, I have noticed these 4.5 things that are not the best. Okay, let's just say it that way. For one, slow starts. Iowa State has not started these games at a ridiculous pace. Multiple games this season, we've seen the Cyclones come out a little lethargic, shooting the ball not that great. Maybe the offense isn't moving the way that it normally does, and they can find themselves either tied up with not very good teams, to be completely honest, or in holes early. I believe Iowa State was down 8 at one point, and I found myself saying, okay, well, they're going to be fine. This is this is normal. This is not the end of the world so far, but that's not where you want to be, because you don't want to have to crawl out of a hole. I would rather this team, if not at least down 8, relatively close with the opponent, especially when it's the Baylor Bears. But why not get ahead of them, right? Why not score more points early, get out to an early start, and then at least make Baylor close the gap? If you got to go on a bunch of runs, which we all know basketball is a game of runs, I'm not going to sit here and act like Iowa State should never be in the deficit the rest of the season. But there is something to be said about if you find yourself down 15 early, now you have to come back from down 15. Even if it is, with 8 minutes left in the first half, you've got a whole 28 minutes or so. It's a lot of time. I understand that. But I'd rather not come back from down 15. The slow start's something that I'm at least keeping an eye on. Just feels like it's been kind of consistent. And in that, when Iowa State's starting slow, especially, or if there's runs where, it's a game of runs. So if in this game, for example, Baylor was on a run and Iowa State was on a scoring drought, it feels like sometimes they lose their identity on offense. There isn't a ton of ball movement, a little bit of stagnancy in the corners, a little bit of ISO ball, maybe a screen here or there. And then they kind of force some weird throw to make it look like they're still trying to run their offense. I understand. I'm just a guy who's wearing too much Iowa State gear, yelling at my TV on a Tuesday night. So I'm not a coach. I have no real room to speak, but that's the way it comes across to me. I would love to, when they're clicking, it just feels like the offense is different, and it's not about whether or not they're making the shots. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. There were a few moments last night where I especially said out loud, that one didn't fall, but that was a good offensive possession. That was a good, drive and kick, little ball movement, whether it's a pick and roll and then you draw 2, you don't go up with it, you kick it out, open shot, as opposed to forcing something. That's what I'm talking about. There are moments with this team where I say, okay, it didn't fall, but that was a phenomenal possession. There are also moments where even if it fell, I'm like, what was that? Sometimes you need that. Sometimes Joshua Jefferson just has to step in and assert authority and say, I am going to take over. I am going to go 1v4 and win this game, or at least this possession. But also, we don't need that every single time. I feel like sometimes the offense gets a little bit out of rhythm. And in that kind of regard, as far as offensive rebounding goes, or rebounding, I'm thinking of the Joshua Jefferson 1v4 situation from last night. Sometimes pressure can rattle this team a little bit, be it full court press, be it teams that are extremely physical on the boards, especially when Iowa State's on defense. And like last night when Baylor was really, really dominating the offensive boards, I felt like Baylor had 21 offensive boards to Iowa State's 20 or 16. I guess those would be Iowa State's offensive boards, though. So like that's not really a great comparison. My point is, sometimes it feels like Iowa State gets a little bit flustered, makes a few mistakes, doesn't really handle pressure all that well. I'm not sure if that's scheme or if that's just players that are losing it a little bit. But that's something that scares me because that's an easy way for another team to go on a run. That's an easy way to lose momentum when you can't handle those situations. That's the concerning portion there for me. But I think, that's just I have to trust the process there. And finally, the situations where Iowa State needs a bucket, right? You're down to, 30 seconds to go. Or I'm trying to think of like another situation where maybe, Baylor's on a run. They're getting it within 3, and there's 6 minutes to go. Iowa State needs a bucket. Kill the momentum. This is not a time to use a timeout. Just go score, and that'll quiet the crowd. It feels to me like Iowa State struggles in those moments. They don't have a bona fide scorer. They don't have a system that can guarantee somebody gets an open look and that somebody is going to hit that shot. Now, granted, this is coming on the heels of a game where Milan shot very poorly, had 4 points, 0 of 3 from beyond the arc, 2 of 6 from the floor. Like, I understand that this is a little bit of recency bias, but I do feel like from what I've seen this season, this team's good. Their offense is good in the half court, but they're almost better in transition. And when you need a bucket, it's going to be in the half court. You're going to have to find a way to get an open look. Somebody cutting to the basket would be great. If not, at least an open jumper. And I just don't feel like right now I've seen enough of that. So those are my main concerns. I still think, though, that this team is very good. I wanted to start this segment off by saying, yeah, they're a very good team. They're top 3 in the nation, and I think that they're very much in that conversation for legitimately being a top 3 team. They'll hold that because they keep winning, but are they actually a top 3 team? And I would say, yeah, I think that they actually are. The question, though, is how do they fare against the Big 12? Because the Big 12 is ridiculously good, and we'll talk about how they fare coming up right here after this. So I just laid out that I think Iowa State is a legitimate top 3 team in the nation, but where do they fit in the Big 12? Well, we're going to talk about it here at Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. But first, I saw you reaching for your mouse or you were scrolling a little bit. Just hit the follow, hit the subscribe button. It's completely free. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, there's a review button there. Super cool. Appreciate every single one of you guys. Let's dive into it. I understand what I just said, and I mean it. I do mean it. I think Iowa State is a top 3 team in the nation, but they're not the top team in the Big 12. I'm going to give that to Arizona. And I'm going to just kind of fire through this top 10 ranking and then give you a little bit of reasoning here and why I think that. Arizona is, I think, the top team to beat in the Big 12 right now. They look phenomenal. They are the top ranked team in the country. They don't really have a lot of flaws. If you watch that Kansas State team, there are a couple clips where they make Kansas State look like a junior high team. I mean, I don't know if that's Kansas State or if that's Arizona. We'd have to talk to Christian Rao about that. But my goodness, is Arizona just a problem right now? And we'll get more into their stats here maybe in a second. But for right now, I am going to say that Arizona is 1. Okay. At 2, I'm going to go Iowa State. I think that's totally fair. I think that they've shown and they've deserved that 2 spot, but they are not far away from BYU. I'm giving BYU the 3, only because the teams that they've beaten in the Big 12 are Kansas State and Arizona State. And I don't think either of those teams are very good, but they dominated Arizona State the other night or last night, and they beat Kansas State handedly as well. 28 point win for BYU over Arizona State. And I had it on the TV and it was ugly. I mean, you had crazy balls going out of bounds, behind the back passes. Richie Saunders, I think, had like 31 or something like that. Ridiculous. AJ DeBanza is a problem. He was hitting windmill dunks in the half court. BYU is a very, 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 very good team. I tweeted that out too. So I keep them at 3 for now because who have they beat? I mean, they beat Clemson by 3. They beat Wisconsin, I guess. They did lose to UConn. Their sole loss so far. Maybe that is something that we can look at. What happened with UConn last night too. But for now, BYU is very much on the heels of Iowa State at that 3 spot in the Big 12. Then I'm going to go ahead and actually, let's really quick talk about the other teams in the Big 12, because those 3 I think everybody knows, right? Arizona, BYU, and Iowa State are all ranked in the top 10. They're not the only teams in the top 10. Houston is also ranked at number 7. And I do think Houston is below BYU as of right now from what I've seen. It's a difficult ranking job. I understand that. But the Big 12 having 4 teams in the Big 10, or excuse me, wow. That doesn't even make any sense. Wow. Big 12 has 4 teams in the top 10. It's a very dominant league, right? This is one of the best, just dominance in a sport that we've seen. Like, if everyone wants to say, like, oh, the SEC in football, like, no, it's the Big 12 in basketball. They are dominating the basketball landscape. So the fact that Iowa State's in that conversation already has me excited, but that's not all. It's not just 4 of the top 10. The Big 12 also has Texas Tech at 14, Kansas at 22, UCF at 25, and I would argue that Oklahoma State is very, very close to being ranked. So Iowa State does have some competition here, and that's what we talk about. They're going to play a tough team just about every single game they have. And so to move on from the top 3 being Zona, Iowa State, and BYU, I have Houston at 4, Texas Tech at 5. That follows the general AP ranking. I understand that. But then next, I actually have Oklahoma State, a team to look out for. And I ended up just doing the top 10 here because I was like, well, if I'm going to rank the teams ahead of Iowa State, I should probably do a few more. And this is just kind of my opinion. Oklahoma State, I have right below Texas Tech at, what would that be, 6 in the Big 12. Look out for the Pokes. Then below them, I have Kansas, UCF, TCU, Colorado. Look, I'm giving Colorado maybe a little bit way too much credit there at number 10, but once you're in the 10s, we can just move on. Kansas, I don't think is that good. Put them a mark or 2 above TCU because TCU's collapse was generational, and good teams don't generally do that. And Kansas found a way to win that game, so I'll give them credit there. But I have not been impressed so far by TCU. They've got a few holes that I have not been impressed by Kansas. They've got a few holes that I have question marks about. They got players that are just randomly sitting. Look, they could turn it around, and they will be a tough opponent for Iowa State. They absolutely will. On top of the fact they're a tough team, just in general, Iowa State and Kansas is kind of like a rivalry a little bit. It's just two of the better teams in basketball squaring off. So Iowa State will have them after playing Oklahoma State. Iowa State's going to have a tough next 2 games. They get Oklahoma State at home, but then they have Kansas on the road. I'm not saying they can't lose that game. Kansas is going to be very, very good, a tough opponent. But I think UCF is probably in there as a tough opponent. TCU, I don't really care, honestly, though, about 6 through 10. I really wanted to talk about where is Iowa State in comparison to the top. Right now, I think Arizona is the top team to beat in the Big 12. Then it's Iowa State. They have a little bit of I'd like to see them turn it on a little bit. These last few games have been kind of odd. Not so much the West Virginia one, obviously won that one handedly in the end. But the Baylor one, terrible first half. A lot of reasons for that. We talked about that just, earlier today, but we should figure that out. We should turn that on a little bit. And then BYU, team to look out for. Absolutely. They are going to be a problem this season. And Iowa State BYU games are always just beyond electric. Luckily, Iowa State only plays them once by my count, and it is in Provo. That was the other thing I wanted to bring up later in this episode. I mentioned it earlier. Baylor had a really cool with the cupcakes and the student section was going nuts behind the basket. I've been watching college basketball for a while now. I don't think I've ever seen anything like BYU's behind the basket. When they were showing just last night, Arizona State shooting free throws, they've got multiple of those car dealership floaty arm guys. I think 2 of them were the mascot, and 2 of them were just random inflatables. And then they've got hypnotism things going on back there. I almost forgot that I was looking at the TV. I felt like I was just so overwhelmed. I can't even imagine being on the court. But hey, these are the legitimate top basketball players in the nation. As far as college goes, maybe they're a little bit more locked in than I am. I don't know. That's actually probably pretty close, if I had to be honest. I bet the comparison is very much there for the locked in factor. But BYU is going to be a very tough place to play. Keep an eye out for them, man. They're going to be a deep run in the tournament type of team. They're going to be a Big 12 contender type of team. They have all the pieces. And the fact that, honestly, the Iowa State's in comparison to BYU as one of the top teams is a huge compliment to the Cyclones, I think, because BYU is just built different right now, and we know how good they've been. And then the addition of AJ DeBanza from this last season, they just are incredible. So I'm speaking really highly of putting Iowa State just above them. And same thing with Arizona. This is going to be a really fun year in the Big 12. And then I haven't really talked about Houston or Texas Tech or Oklahoma State. That's what the other channels are for. So if you haven't, like, go watch those guys talk about their basketball teams and learn a little bit more about them. But yeah, this is shaping up to be a phenomenal year of basketball in the Big 12, and Iowa State is so far at the top of the runnings. Like, they are absolutely in this thing, and I think they can go on a little bit of a run here, extend this best start to the season to who knows. Oklahoma State, Kansas, Cincinnati, UCF, Oklahoma State. Tough to beat a team 2 times in a season, Oklahoma State. But if they get those 5, it's 20-0. That'd be a pretty sweet start to the season. Let me know what you think of this basketball team. Are you concerned? Are they a Final Four contender? I'm a little bit conflicted, but I think that they are good enough to go very, very far in the Big 12, in the top, the NCAA tournament this season. So I'm excited to watch every single game. Thank you guys for watching every single day, making this your first watch or listen. If you haven't already, hit and subscribe down below. It's completely free. Helps us prove that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. Until next time, Cyclone fans, sayonara.